Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and the Vols. This is 104.5, The Zone.
Day number 2 of the Buck Reising Show without Buck Reising here on 104.5 The Zone. It's a little bit of duct tape, a Sharpie. It's the Boling Show with various guest hosts around at Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome into the show alongside A to Z Sports, Austin Stanley. We traded one A to Z guy. We upgraded to the A to Z guy, the A in A to Z, right. Joining us this morning. How are you, Austin?
I'm doing good. You'd be surprised at the amount of people that it takes them so long to understand or realize, oh, Austin and Zach, A and Z.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah. People don't, until it hits you in the face, a lot of people don't realize it.
Okay, well, this is a credit to you all for what you all have built and what you all have grown over time. I remember the original days of A to Z Sports.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like you have the OGs that have been there like from the ground up that are like, oh, yeah, Austin and Zach. I feel like maybe it's your new audience.
Yeah, a lot of people might have are curious about where we went if they're not digitally savvy. But no, we've been doing a lot of stuff the last 5 years. It's been great. And this is the first time in over 5 years that I've done 3 hours of radio.
Wow. Well, welcome back.
No, I'm used to the sprints. I'm used to the 1 hour, no commercial breaks, just go.
So we were talking about this in the green room before the show. So I was doing Jay Martin Ramon last week, on Monday this week. 4 hours versus 3 hours feels like a sprint compared to 4 hours.
Right.
But nothing really breaks at the beginning of the show when you start at 6 a.m. So, like I was telling my roommate this, telling my friends this yesterday, like Buck has it so easy. So easy. I was jokingly like, why does Buck act like he's tired all the time? Like, news is breaking as he is on the air, like, more times than not. Like, I feel like you have to prep half the show that you would prep because it's 10 a.m. to 1.
Yeah, well, Buck's always tired because he sucks at sleeping.
That's also true.
I've talked to him about this.
Very true.
I've been trying to help him out with his sleep patterns, with his diet. And so, I don't know if he's actually taking my advice, but I'm here for him. As one of his 2 employers, I'm trying to make sure that we get the best Buck Reising we can get.
615-737-1045, the number if you want to jump in on the show today. This is something that I don't think people know about Buck. I feel like we are diving deeper. We're peeling back a layer of the onion every time that I or anyone else does this show. That he really does, like, his hours like aren't that late at night, but the guy gets up at like 4.
No, yeah, like I wake up at 5-ish.
Okay.
Buck's always up whenever I'm up, which is great because we text back and forth and kind of set the day up at that point. And then, he's A to Z Sports Primetime. The show he hosts for our network is live streaming at 8 p.m. Central. So he goes for about an hour there.
Right.
And then there's some wind down process you got to have. You can't just do it's kind of like sports talk radio and cocaine is like a live stream like that where it's just nonstop go. And you're solo, so you have to have some wind down there. So, and then he doesn't sleep well, and that's just, I guess, that's the cycle that he's in. And it's football season, so there are no days off. Because Sunday for us and for Buck are 12+ hour days.
Right.
So he's in Egypt now, so now he gets to try. Actually, I don't even know if he's in Egypt. Last I heard from him, he was still in Germany. I don't know if he's made it there yet.
Oh my goodness. Well, wherever he is, we'll get a stunning food review. We can definitely count on that wherever he is spending his time today or whenever. But that's really funny. Sports talk radio on cocaine is a really funny
without the actual cocaine.
Right, of course.
Yeah, for the record.
So there's 2 guys from Brentwood hosting a radio show. You got a cocaine mention about 5 minutes in. Not something I expected.
Well, I wasn't planning on it.
Well, hey, if only there was anything to talk about in a bye week. I feel like on the college football front, obviously the coaching carousel has been a big topic of conversation, but college football playoff rankings, we get those yesterday. We'll talk at length about that throughout the show today. Grant Ramey, Go Vols 247, coming up at 11:20. Lots of Titans here in the first hour as we take a look at kind of where the Titans offense specifically hits the reset button in this bye week and in this break. And there's kind of a worrying trend, Austin, between their scoring plays, their scoring drives. That's something I want to get into coming up here in a couple minutes. But on the Vols front, Austin, we talked about this in one of our meetings earlier this year. From January to now, has this been the best Tennessee news cycle in like the past 5-10 years since Lane Kiffin?
The most positive?
Not even the most positive, just it's the most year-round, there's something going on news cycle.
So as someone who owns a website, I mean, I see the numbers, right? I see the analytics, and it's been great. Now, we weren't as built out in our business for the 2016 season plus that off season.
Right.
When that was a crazy news cycle, but it was mostly negative.
Yeah.
So I would say this is the most positive news cycle that Tennessee's had. Probably, I would say since Lane Kiffin was hired, early December of 2008.
Right. I say that because you have, at the beginning of the year, you have a good enough basketball team to get people interested, but they're bad enough to where it crashes and burns when they lose. Yeah. And they bounce out in the first round of the NCAA tournament again. Then you have Tennessee baseball giving you summer content, a summer conversation that we have not had in a really long time. Then you have a first-year head coach that people aren't really that excited about at the time that then exceeds expectations. That's been rare for Tennessee, where a first-year head coach really exceeds expectations this much in his first season for Josh Heupel. And then you have another really good basketball team. You get the top point guard in the country, and you have a team in Kennedy Chandler and Rick Barnes that's exciting, and you have a bowl game you didn't expect to have. So literally from January through December, there has been something positive and something negative enough to get a genuine reaction about Tennessee football.
And there hasn't been the devastating arrest, injury, like Caden Salter happened.
Knock on wood right now.
Yeah, right. I mean, but that's how it is. Like I remember waking up and then New Keith Richardson was arrested.
I was about to say New Keith Richardson's
like,
the one I remember.
What is going on? I remember the fight at I guess it was Bar Knox with Derek Rogers and others back in the day. Like you remember all these things. There hasn't been that either. Outside of the Caden Salter situation back in, I guess, early mid-spring.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's been probably the most positive thing or news cycle since Lane Kiffin got hired. And that only lasted 12, 13 months.
Right.
Because then it just all burnt to the ground or with all the mattresses in January.
With all the mattresses and with the attempt of students to tear down the atrocity of a sculpture that is on the pedestrian walkway in Knoxville.
Oh, yeah.
That's where Peyton Manning should be.
Yes.
615-737-1045, our number. So I preface that, Austin, with the fact that I feel like the Titans are on a quick downhill. Wheels are coming off, not in terms of the way the team has played, but people are starting to check out a little bit on what this Titans team is doing. Because you have Derrick Henry possibly just coming back for the playoffs. I think you have a lot of people that are basically saying, look, I'm going to put my expectations and my hope for the Titans on hold until we have something tangible that we know about Derrick Henry. And right now, there is not much tangible that we can say the Titans can build on. And we're going to give kind of one realistic goal each for this Titans team coming up here in a minute. But I feel like after the loss of the Texans, you kind of hit that sweet spot where people have a Titans team that is good enough to, you've seen the proof of concept, even without Derrick Henry, for them to beat a good team in L.A. And to beat at the time, an okay team in the Saints. It's a really interesting time because I don't remember a bye week like this where people were so excited to have a bye week like they are this week for the Titans.
Yeah, and then you have to wait. Like in the bye week, there's a bunch of waiting. I got into unfortunately a Twitter conversation yesterday.
Love it.
Where I said it's that the number one seed's not realistic anymore. It's not, because you can't assume future health.
Right.
Because you look at what this bye week can give the Titans, and that's extra time for Julio, AJ, Bud Dupree, and then even David Long, Rashawn Evans, all these guys to get healthy. But you can't assume because we don't know. We don't know if they're going to be back against Jacksonville or not. The guys who aren't on IR. Julio can come off IR. You don't know if he's going to be back. You don't know what the Titans' plan is going to be. So you're in this weird kind of no man's land of not knowing what to think about this team. They're in a great position. They did all their heavy lifting in the first 8 weeks of the season with Derrick Henry. Now you're in this waiting period to figure out who's coming back and when, and what do you have to accomplish to set yourself up to have a big January where they can still accomplish their goals. It's just you don't know what it's going to look like until playoff time.
Dallas on YouTube saying that might be the dumbest sounding take. Wow, 10 minutes in. The Titans are 8-4. They have beat themselves the past 2 weeks. If they fix that, then the wheels will be right back on. LOL, he adds at the end. No, I don't think the wheels are off for the Titans. I think the fan base, the wheels are kind of coming off in the way that they are engaging with what the Titans are doing. I just think people are starting to check out until people get healthy.
Yeah, I agree. And there's not, like, remember, there was a month straight of every Monday, some national media person said something stupid about the Titans. We haven't heard anybody say anything about the Titans outside of Nashville in 3 weeks.
How quickly we forget we were trying to rename the Titans defense like 2 weeks ago.
Like, Keyshawn Johnson didn't even care enough to come back and say that he was right. Like, he just moved on because nobody really cares outside of, obviously, where we're at.
615-737-1045, our number. When we come back, let's dive into this Titans offense and the worrying trend of how this team is scoring points. I'll explain what I mean by that coming up. One reasonable fix for this Titans offense coming out of the bye week. Will Boling, Austin Stanley, A to Z Sports with you until 1 o'clock. It's the Buck Reising Show, and it's 104.5 The Zone. Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone. You can join us on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline at 615-737-1045. Talking about one realistic goal for this Titans offense heading out of the bye week alongside Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports. I'm Will Boling. Brett Batchelor, our producer, hitting the reset button for the Titans this week. And one guy announcing his retirement, a former Titan, per his Twitter account just a minute ago, Kenny Vaccaro. Officially retired, guy that has not played this year. Titans let him go over the offseason, and a guy that helped the Titans in a pretty tough spot a couple years ago.
Absolutely bailed him out.
Yeah.
Back, what year was that, 2018?
Yes.
When Jonathan Cyprian goes down, torn ACL, in training camp practice number 2, and Vaccaro was just sitting there available. So he was a good player for, the better half of, 2.5, 3 years until – looked like he lost a step, maybe was battling through some injuries, but a really good player and a tone setter for this team for a couple of years.
615-737-1045, our number, as we look at the trend that I think kind of tells the story of this Titans offense without Derrick Henry, Austin, and talking about a realistic goal for this team. This is the yardage of every scoring play for this Titans team since Derrick Henry went out. And I felt like before I even looked at this that it was going to be pretty bad, that it was all going to look the same. I didn't know it would look this similar. So against the Rams, you take away the pick six. You have a 2-yard Jeff Swaim reception, 1-yard Tannehill run, 1-yard Adrian Peterson run. Against the Saints, 1-yard Ryan Tannehill run, 2-yard Michael Pruitt catch, and then a lot of Randy Bullock field goals. Against the Texans, an Anthony Ferkser fumble recovery, which is basically just a 3-4 yard reception is what it was going to be.
Yeah, Hilliard was hit at like the 2.
Right.
Or something like that, yeah.
You have that. You have the 18-yard Des Fitzpatrick catch.
Right.
Against the Patriots, a 1-yard Nick Westbrook-Akina reception, and then you have the massive outlier, the 68-yard Dontrell Hilliard run. So without the Hilliard touchdown run, the Titans are averaging 3.7 yards per scoring play. And if you take out the 18-yard Des Fitzpatrick catch, too, the Titans are basically just from inside the 2 is the only way they are scoring right now. This is not a sustainable way for this Titans team to force themselves to go on long, methodical drive to score points. I understand that was the way the Titans felt like against the Patriots on the road, keep the ball out of the hands of Mac Jones. It's the only way they felt like they were going to be able to win. I feel like this Titans offense, with as comfortable as Ryan Tannehill is, my fix is you rely on the tempo and the no huddle to try to create more explosive plays.
Okay, so you think Ryan Tannehill's comfortable?
Oh, I think he's totally uncomfortable
right
now.
And
that's
so
what I'm saying.
I don't think I think it's tough because tempo is all about rhythm and confidence, and we talked about the stat, I guess it was Monday, when I shot you that text of all the 3 and outs, 5 3 and outs on the opening drives this season through 12 games. Like, there's no confidence or rhythm in this offense. And I don't know if you can trust the current weapons around Tannehill to execute in a no huddle or up tempo.
Right.
I think a lot of times I go back to Deontay Foreman's first game on Sunday Night Football against the Rams, where clearly Foreman looked at Ryan Tannehill and you could read his lips say, where do I go?
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. It's like, because he had just gotten there that week. So obviously that's fair for Foreman to do that. But I just don't know if they can execute that way just because they don't have the experience.
They've played from behind so much, and we talked about, too, their ineptitude on opening drives of entire games. And I think against the Texans, it was their first touchdown drive of that game that ended in the Des Fitzpatrick touchdown throw, or touchdown reception for Des Fitzpatrick. I believe it was 8 of those plays were shotgun no huddle, and 9 of the plays of the 11 on that drive were in the shotgun. Like, I feel like the plan B for this team when they get out of their identity and get down early has been no huddle into the first half, beginning of the second half, Ryan Tannehill basically calling the plays on his own and trying to create some kind of tempo and rhythm and momentum. I feel like that should be the plan A, just because they're having to get out of their identity so much at the beginning of games that at what point do you say that our identity when we're down just needs to become their identity? Because that seems like the only success they're having. They have not scored a touchdown with the lead since the first half against the Saints, I believe, or the beginning of the third quarter against the New Orleans Saints.
After the Dylan Cole fumble on the kickoff.
After the fumble on the kickoff.
Right.
That's the last time this team scored a touchdown where they were not trailing in that current game.
Well, I mean, the key thing is turnovers, right? Because against the Rams, they won because of the defense forcing turnovers and getting, what was it? The first touchdown against the Rams was, because the David Long interception on the 2. Byard gets the pick 6. Ryan Tannehill runs it in on a play to make it 21-6, I guess, at that point. And so you're in a good spot there. The Saints game, we just mentioned it with the forced fumble and the kickoff. The last 2 games have been the opposite. It's been 9 turnovers by the offense. And when you go back and look at the Patriots game, the Titans had 3 turnovers in plus territory.
Right.
So it wasn't like they just had turnovers. They had turnovers where they were trying to drive to score. And they had the missed field goal by Bullock, the missed extra point. If you look at it, that's 13 points off the board at minimum. If they just kick field goals instead of turnovers in Patriots territory. And all that happened at 26-13 or earlier. So really that game was all about the Titans turning the ball over, as was the Texans, because they can gain yards. We saw them gain yards passing against Houston. We saw them gain 270 yards running against New England. So I get your point about the lack of scoring outside of the high red zone is totally fair. I just don't know if the solution is no huddle. The solution needs to be hang on to the damn ball.
That's true.
And don't fumble. It's because I think shortening the game until they can get some more weapons healthy is the best thing to go about this. But, I think it's a good thing putting the Patriots game and Texans game to bed. The fact that you can look forward to these last 5 games after the bye.
Right.
You're going to get a few guys healthy, maybe. We don't know exactly who or when. But and you saw Hilliard, Foreman can do it as long as they don't fumble. You saw this offensive line play well.
Yeah.
Ryan Tannehill against Houston could throw the ball around a little bit. Now, you got to have guys run the right routes and be in the right spots or it's going to be an interception. So you saw that they can do something there without Derrick Henry and AJ and Julio. I think you have to build on that and find some way to just not shoot yourself in the foot again.
Yeah. I think the other part of this conversation is that it's not sustainable for the Titans to continue to dominate the turnover margin on the defensive side the way that it did against New Orleans and as well against the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, you look at this team with and without Bud Dupree. I saw this on Twitter yesterday. 7 games, 22 sacks, 7 interceptions with Bud Dupree. Without Bud Dupree, 5 games, 7 sacks, 2 interceptions. And I think, Austin, you and I could both agree that speaks as much to not having Bud Dupree as it does. Denico Autry doesn't have the same impact as an edge as he does on the inside.
Totally.
Not even close.
Because what did Vrabel talk about? The lack of pressuring Mac Jones from the inside of the pocket, from the center of the pocket. So Jeffrey Simmons, I thought, played really well against New England. He was all over the field making plays, but he was unable to get pushed solo up front, and you don't have T.R. Tart either. So it's Naquan Jones and Jeff Simmons in the middle, and you need somebody else. Ola Daney was a big injury that helped or cost them the ability to have Autry inside against New England. So if you can get Ola healthy, Bud Dupree can't come back until the Pittsburgh game, so you're going to have to beat Jacksonville without him. But yeah, he's key. Like, all these guys are key because you have zero depth now.
615-737-1045 our number if you want to jump in and give your realistic goal. I say realistic because, get healthy. It's going to be what people say. I know. It'd be great if the Titans got healthy. That is a good goal to have, but I don't know how realistic that is at this point.
That's
just a snap of a finger.
That's just a hope.
It's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Austin, what is your one fix for this Titans offense?
I think it's continued to keep Ryan Tannehill upright, and because he has been the one constant. You've had so many other guys. I saw this on Twitter the other day too, that the Titans have only had they've only had 13 different players who have played in all 12 games this season. That's the least in the NFL. The most in the NFL, the Chiefs and the Bengals with 32 apiece. And then the Cardinals, the second least, but with 18. So Ryan Tannehill's one of those 13, and he has to be one of those 13. So you got to keep him upright. And I think you kind of you almost touched on it. What I was going to say too is you got to move Tannehill around.
Absolutely.
Because against Houston and for a lot of the Patriots game, it was just, like you said, a lot of shotgun. It's catch the snap, pop up, look for something, or a quick drop back, whatever it is. There's been a lot of play action pass missing. And you just saw they can still run the ball.
Yeah.
But so, keep your play action pass in the holster, keep using that. Because that's a big weapon for Tannehill. It helps out your receivers who can't create separation on their own, get open, and it helps Tannehill move around a little bit because he's picked up a lot of key first downs. He picked up 2 against New England with his legs, and so I think you got to move Tannehill, but also make sure that he stays one of those 13 guys who's played in all 12 games.
Well, and I think too it helps you kind of change your explosive play issue because that's the other side of my fix as well, is that when all your touchdowns are 2 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard and 2 yard, this Titans offense is at its best when it's hitting on the explosive plays down the field. And the only time that they are doing that right now is on catches and run by Nick Westbrook-Akina and Marcus Johnson in these past 4 games. Talk about not sustainable. I mean, no one is going to be surprised by Nick Westbrook-Akina anymore the way they were over, I think, the past 2 or 3 games now when he is wide receiver 1.
Right.
I mean, he's less likely to hit on a slant against somebody's 3rd or 4th corner when A.J. Brown's not in the game and Julio Jones is not in the game.
Well, and you saw Hilliard, obviously, with a 68-yard touchdown. Foreman had the 30-yarder where he fumbled. But then, I mean, there was a 17-yard gain by Hilliard. You've seen Foreman a couple times in the screen game make some plays. NWI had the 24-yard catch. That was on the flea flicker that picked up 24 yards. Hollister and Fitzpatrick each had 1 for 14, and you had Tannehill run for 11. So they actually had a lot more of those double-digit yard plays against New England that you want to see more of. And look, the Patriots are a pretty good defense, and the Titans' offensive line had their way with the Patriots front, so that's promising. It's all about turnovers. You can't win when you keep turning the ball over 4.5 times a game.
I think at this point, too, as good as your defense is, and it's wild looking back at the way that defense really did play in the second half against the Texans. It was the best statistical performance by the Tennessee Titans defense under Mike Vrabel in his entire time here. You're basically at the point as an offense, just don't completely implode. I mean, that's honestly a realistic expectation for them, is that this team just has to avoid the disaster plays and forget about the explosive plays. I mean, honestly, if you put together 2 long sustained touchdown drives the way you did against the Patriots, your defense is good enough to give you a chance to win. Like
defense is good enough as you walk into all 5 of these games left. The defense is good enough to win you that game.
It wasn't at New England. That's the difference.
It kind of was.
You think so?
Yeah. Look at all those. They gave up yards, right? But you're going to give up yards. It's 2021. You're going to give up yards. But it was a lot of field goals.
It's still a career high for Mac Jones.
The defense kept you alive. Yeah, we only had 1 touchdown.
Well, that's true.
The defense kept you alive in that game. The offense could not take advantage of it until the dam broke, because the defense is going to let you and keep you in it until you keep taking advantage of that, and the dam breaks and they break up.
Right.
So, look, against Jacksonville, good enough to win that one, good enough to beat Pittsburgh defensively.
Right.
The Niners game is interesting because they are surging and getting better. The Dolphins, kind of similar, but not as strong as the Niners. And the Texans, you got to beat them too.
The fact that the Dolphins have the 2nd longest winning streak in the NFL right now blows my mind.
Well, they had to climb out of that hole. When they start 1-5.
Just Tua Tagovailoa started playing a little bit closer to the way he was at Alabama, but
yeah. Well, JV on YouTube says the depth of this team is terrible. What about, and asked front office question mark? I mean, the depth was great, but the depth is gone. Like the
depth is hurt too. That's the problem.
Exactly. Like
Marcus Johnson, soft tissue injury.
How many wide receivers have played for the Titans this year?
That was the conversation at training camp too, of like, wow, this team has more depth at wide receiver than it has had
ever.
Yes, literally ever.
And everybody's gone.
Literally everyone. I think too, and fans could point to this a little more easily. I know that Caleb Farley got hurt. I know that Isaiah Wilson is an outlier, but your last 2 first-round picks are not doing anything right now on the field. Your 2nd-round picks, one in Christian Fulton was out for last year. This year, very good player. That's a hit. Mm-hmm. Dylan Radins is a guy that, again, can you afford to take a chance on a guy that didn't play football last year? I know that you can't judge a draft pick after 1 year, and I'm not going to do that. And I hate giving draft grades until like 3 or 4 years down the road because it's just not fair to them. It's not fair to anybody involved. But this is a win now Titans team with the where Ryan Tannehill is and his age and his contract, where Derrick Henry is in the same situations. And your lack of production out of your first and second and third round picks is exposed more when you have this many injuries. It's a perfect storm to expose your lack of depth and the lack of quality that you got at the top of the last two draft classes.
I think there's a couple different ways you can approach a draft. There's the bad teams that have to get players to help now. Then there's the good teams that are trying to build for the future. The Titans have been the good team trying to build for the future because when they go into the draft in 2020 and then this past year, there's not like a glaring hole of you can draft this guy and he's going to be a day one starter.
Right.
There weren't a lot of starting jobs up for grabs. I think John Robinson was attempting to go after the guys with the best potential. And maybe that is Caleb Farley. It could be. I mean, that guy's a freak athletically.
Yeah.
But, he's been hurt for over a year now. Both him and Dylan Radins didn't play football last year.
Mm-hmm.
Radins played one game
because
of what happened at North Dakota State.
Right.
So there's a lot of rust that comes into that. But maybe Dylan Radins can be serviceable over the next 3 years of his rookie deal and can fit you in a spot where he can play either guard, maybe a tackle here and there, but can be a good player for you. But it felt like a weird pick on draft night in the second round, and it still feels like a weird pick right now because you can't operate on the fact that you draft not knowing you're going to be the most injured team in football history.
It's kind of like when broadcasters on like a 3rd and 16. It's one of the classic color commentator anecdotes. It's like, well, there's no play on your play sheet for 3rd and 16. Really no one there. All right, 3rd down. Here we go. It's like there's really no draft strategy for leading the league in players used by week 13.
And I don't know why it's happened. Vrabel gave a great answer on his strength coach when he was asked by Luke Worsham the other day. It's just, is it the worst luck ever? Maybe. Are they doing something they shouldn't be doing in April, May, and June? I have no idea. That's creating these soft tissue injuries. I have no clue. But, Monty Rice hurts his foot. Derrick Henry hurts his foot. A.J. Brown gets hit in the shoulder and now is out with a chest injury. Like, that's the thing. You can't prep for that. There's nothing a strength coach or medical staff can do about that one.
615-737-1045, going through our one realistic fix for the Titans offense heading into the bye week. You can join us on the phone line, 615-737-1045, and as well on 1045 The Zone TV, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, where you interact with the show. You can watch us on Twitter as well at 1045 The Zone. We'll continue the conversation, take a look at the roster moves yesterday for the Titans. Coming up next, Buck Reising Show with Will Boling and Austin Stanley right here, 1045 The Zone. Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone. I'm about to say this music sounds dark. Like Brett Batchelor is like the nicest guy I know. This is it's like Michael Myers a little bit going on there. Sounds like that sounds, Austin, like a song that a Williamson County high school basketball team would like go out to in their starting lineup.
Oh yeah, totally. Definitely. Like trying to be harder than you actually are. Yeah.
Yeah, the mean streets of Brentwood, walking out to like Soulja Boy instrumental.
Oh yeah.
It's like, well, that's what we grew up in. Will Boling, Austin Stanley with
Soulja
you
Boy,
here.
I was definitely in college at that point. So mine was We Ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Actually this morning I was working out over here, and so there's like a boxing class that goes on usually when I'm in there working out, and so usually like the music is like blaring, and you cannot hear like yourself think the entire time, and for whatever reason like the music just stopped for like a minute, and there's just no sound, and the instructor like came over like the mic to like the people doing the class at one point and was just like okay, like sorry, I didn't mean to, like let's keep doing this, like keep, you know, like let's do 10 V-ups, like whatever it was. It was like I'm trying to get the music back on. And then out of nowhere, after like a minute of silence, you just hear, I feel the master. And it's just, we read. And just lost it. Yeah. I was like in the middle of like bicep curls or something, which looking at me, you thought I've never done a bicep curl in my life, but I promise I have. But I just, like, out of no silence, and you just hear, I feel the master. Like, oh my gosh. This could be nothing else.
Makes you feel some type of way.
I think the first time I heard that song was one of those Tennessee-Alabama games where Bama was a 30-point favorite in Neyland. It's like most of my life. And that was like, I think the song had just come out. I don't know when that song came out.
Like 03.
That early?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay. The song had not just come out.
03, 04.
I was thinking closer to like 7 or 8.
No.
Okay. Showing my age here again. And that was like the song they would play as they were kicking off. And like in the first quarter, it's
2002.
Like, wow.
2002.
Okay. That was like the song that was like the kickoff song. Now it's like Joker, whatever, at Tennessee games. That was the song to like get the crowd going. But then, of course, Tennessee like sticks with these things and like keeps playing them even when they're down 30.
Yeah, too long. Yeah.
Which is one of my issues with the game experience at Neyland Stadium.
Third down for what worked.
Yes.
It worked, and then until it didn't. And then it
until they went 4-8, and Arkansas fans are doing third down for what after they came back against a terrible Arkansas team.
It worked. It was great until it wasn't. And then gimmicks are good, but know when to move on.
The worst was the Neyland disruptor count every time the opposing team had a false start under Butch Jones. And you'd be like down 30 to, I don't know who at that point. You were down 2 touchdowns to like Arkansas. And they get a false start because they clearly just didn't like know what the play call was, and there's no one in the stadium. And it counts as the Jumbotron, like the Neyland effect. Stop it.
It doesn't matter.
Does not at all. Titans make 2 roster moves, I guess, yesterday. Monty Rice on injured reserve. Ankle injury against the Patriots. His game cut short after just 19 snaps. 4 starts, 10 total games for a guy that I don't think was expected to have this big of an impact in his first year. But now he's another guy on IR. Titans waiving Austin Mack from the practice squad yesterday. Talking about in our last segment the reasonable fixes for this Titans offense. And on the defensive side, Austin, that's a guy that I think has been one of the pleasant surprises.
Oh, yeah, him and David Long. Now get David Long back and Rashaan Evans, because right now you can't go out there against anybody with Jayon Brown and a Dylan Cole type of player or Joe Jones or whoever it might be playing linebacker. So you really need both Rashaan Evans and David Long to get back for this last 5-game stretch. And I don't know what the length of Monty Rice's injury is going to be, but he was a good player. It was a good rookie showing, and I think he allows you to not have to sign either Evans or Jayon.
Right. And that was my next question, is that I think we are hurtling towards at a great speed, a timeline where possibly neither of those guys are on this team next year.
I think we're there.
Yeah.
We're sitting there. David Long Jr. is more than capable. Monty Rice, good when he was in there. Now you got to find that depth. Who is the third guy?
Right. I think that's
free agent somewhere else.
That's a reasonable pick as well if the Titans wanted to get a premium guy in a first-round pick at that position next year. Obviously, I don't love doing the offseason
Come on,
conversation
it's
stuff in the middle of the
1st,
season.
The Titans are 8-4, and you're busting out first round draft picks.
But that's because where are the last 2 first-round draft picks? That's why. Because we had just talked about it. It's why I'm having this conversation.
Isaiah Wilson redemption in New York. God, I still follow him on Instagram.
we're talking about a gold mine of content that Tennessee has been.
Like A to Z Sports was absolutely a winner in the Isaiah Wilson beat. And Buck probably helped him get this gig.
I was going to say
covering Isaiah Wilson the way we did. I feel like we broke almost every story about Isaiah Wilson.
Buck Reising's big break.
Yeah, seriously.
Senior Isaiah Wilson reporter Buck Reising. A to Z Sports.
But actually, it was every time he would put up an Instagram story, you had to check it because you didn't know where he was going to be and what he was going to be doing.
Like a Pandora's box of of him lifting weights and they don't want me to be great.
No.
And partying.
I never saw a single
really?
workout. It was always weird
I feel like
stuff.
those are his tweets of him tweeting stuff like, man, if y'all knew what I've been through.
I know. I don't even know how to describe his Instagram stories. I don't understand it. Now, a lot of it was propping up his former Georgia teammates or something like that. Like whenever, somebody would score a touchdown in the NFL, he'd post it.
He would tweet about Cade Mays a good bit.
Yeah, I mean, they were on the O-line at Georgia together.
Right.
But yeah, I still follow. I should probably unfollow Isaiah Wilson from the A to Z account.
At this point,
There's
it's just
no point. It's not. He's in a stable situation.
It's like people watching, but it's one guy.
It was a train wreck. In a car wreck. I was rubbernecking Isaiah Wilson Instagram stories.
It's like what's the Office quote of it's like the car crash you just can't look away from.
Absolutely.
Pam says at one point.
That's what it was.
It's it's the Michael Scott quote of when a 12-year-old crashes your car, you don't blame the 12-year-old. He didn't know any better. You blame the adult that gave the 12-year-old the keys to your car and said, "Drive, kid."
No doubt.
I think I made that comparison to Jarrett Garantano last year with Tennessee football.
Also valid. Yes.
615-737-1045. Covering old Tennessee gimmicks at kickoffs, Isaiah Wilson and JG on the same segment. Get you a show that can do all of the above. Coming up, we got Grant Ramey coming up at 11:20. Going to get a little bit of Tennessee conversation, a little bit of football, a little bit of basketball. This is the time where most Tennessee fans realize once again that they have other teams that don't just play football. Not all of you, but some of you. So we'll talk a little bit of football, just a little bit of hoops as well, with Grant Ramey with Tennessee back in the win column last night. Plus, the new college football rankings are out. And is Notre Dame the biggest loser of the coaching carousel over these past couple of days? One quote from the College Football Playoff Committee might suggest that Notre Dame could end up getting the short end of the stick. And I don't think Austin is going to agree with me on this. Coming up next. We'll reset the headlines, talk a little college football coming up next. Will Boling, Austin Stanley with you here on 104.5 The Zone.
It is 11:01. Good morning. I'm Jonathan Schaefer. It was a fun night at Bridgestone Arena last night as the Nashville Predators destroyed the Columbus Blue Jackets 6-0. Philip Forsberg, 4 goals. His teammate Mikael Granlund had 4 assists. College basketball in a game that was heard on 104.5 The Zone. Number 13 Tennessee crushed Presbyterian 86-44 at Thompson Boling Arena last night. Kennedy Chandler, 15 points, 7 assists. Titans placed rookie linebacker Monty Rice on injured reserve. Wide receiver Austin Mack was released from the practice squad. And with their win against Ohio State, Michigan jumped to number 2 in the latest college football playoff rankings that were released last night. Undefeated Georgia remains at number 1. Alabama is at 3 after surviving a scare in the Iron Bowl against Auburn. Georgia, Alabama will meet in the SEC championship game on Saturday. You can hear the game right here on The Zone. Meanwhile, undefeated Cincinnati remains at number 4. The final CFP rankings will come out on Sunday. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Hour 2 of the show. It is the Buck Reising Show, minus the most successful streaming and podcast host in Nashville, Tennessee. You got to settle for at least like 4 or 5 on the list. I'm not going to put myself second. I might put myself top 5, maybe top 10. Will Boling alongside A to Z Sports Austin Stanley with you here on this Wednesday. I had to check, Austin, that it was Wednesday as I said that, like down in my bottom right corner, because I have no concept for time filling in for all these people that are out right now on 104.5 The Zone. How are you?
I'm doing good. 1 hour down. That's usually where my airtime is done for the day. I've already done, that's 2 hours today if you include the A to Z morning show that I did today with Charlie Burris. Zach's in Dallas this week as we've expanded our A to Z sports brand into Dallas this past summer. And so a lot of, December's going to be an interesting month. I'll leave it at that. It's going to be fun. It's going to be very busy. Not a lot of vacation time, as most people try to take vacation time in December, but I'm here for it.
So that's going to be fun for you guys next year when the Cowboys are on the Titans schedule.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, it's great. I mean, although the A to Z jinx has been born.
Yes, okay. I saw your tweet about this the other day.
Yes, because the Titans and the Cowboys, the Cowboys are actually first. The Titans and Cowboys are first and second in players on combined injured reserve and the COVID reserve list. So I don't know. It's not our fault.
It's not great. Not great. I hope there is not a correlation to soft tissue injuries as well.
I don't think so.
There's certainly been plenty of those for the Titans this year. Talking a little bit about college football, we got Grant Ramey of Go Vols 247 coming up here in a couple of minutes to talk Tennessee with us. But Austin, the new college football playoff ranking is out. Michigan's first victory over Ohio State in 10 years gives the Wolverines a very clear path to a possible first appearance in the college football playoff. Number 2 in yesterday's rankings. Georgia, of course, number 1 for the 5th straight week. Alabama 3, Cincinnati 4, Oklahoma State 5. And Austin, I feel like we are on track for what could be a disaster for Cincinnati. The way Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma, if Oklahoma State can get through Baylor, if Alabama looks competent against Georgia, I think things get really interesting coming up next week.
Oh, man. It's all up to Alabama because I think that's tough because Oklahoma State, I don't really know. Like, I feel like Cincinnati should feel okay.
Yeah.
And the only way that Cincinnati should not feel okay is if Bama beats Georgia.
Bama wins, right. No, I think I agree with you. The way this committee has treated Cincinnati this whole year, it's odd that, to me, they changed the criteria a little bit for the final rankings. That's something that they've talked about on the committee that, I think has been a well-documented error that the committee has made is that, the process changes a little bit for the final rankings as it does for all of them, because at this point it's just theater.
And honestly, I don't pay attention to the rankings until this week.
I agree.
Because it's pointless. You're just getting upset, red in the face over nothing because it's going to play itself out. I understand it's for TV, and that's look. ESPN has to fill, 30-minute slot every Tuesday night. Fill it with this. It's good content for TV, but it really doesn't matter until we get to this point of the season where championship weekend's here, and you have to see who can help themselves and who can hurt themselves. And I think Cincinnati's in a good spot. And now Houston's not a pushover, so they got to be able to beat Houston.
Right.
But I do like where they're at.
In the 7-year history of the college football playoff, only 6 top 4 teams in the next to last rankings did not make the playoff. Georgia has done it twice, 2019 and 2018. They came in at number 4.
By losing SEC title games, right?
Right. Auburn in 2017. I believe the same situation.
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah, they lose to Georgia in the SEC title. Wisconsin in 2017. They lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship.
They didn't just lose. They lost 59-0 or something like that.
Absolutely killed. Iowa, a year after getting drubbed by Tennessee in the Tax Slayer Bowl in 2015, was ranked number 4. I think that was another team that lost to Ohio State on the way. Yeah. And then TCU. I totally forgot about that TCU team in 2014. That was ranked number 3.
That was the first one. That was the TCU Baylor where they were both. That's because the Big 12 messed up.
Yep.
And didn't name a champion.
Right.
And before
That's
they
right.
had a Big 10 championship or Big 12 championship game.
Who was that Trayvon Boykin still? Quarterback of that team?
I want to say, yeah, it was. I think it was. It definitely wasn't Andy Dalton. We know that, but those are the 2 TCU quarterbacks of record that I remember. That was definitely Boykin.
I don't think I could remember 2 very different TCU quarterbacks either.
Yeah, very different. Opposites.
37-33 for Oklahoma State over Oklahoma on Saturday. Highest ranking for them all season. They got number 9 Baylor in the Big 12 title game. Cincinnati, Houston's ranked number 21. You mentioned them. Gosh, doesn't it feel similar to when Brian Kelly left Cincinnati, though, for Notre Dame? And now you have Brian Kelly opening up the Notre Dame job for reportedly one of the 2 jobs Luke Fickell would take, Ohio State or Notre Dame. If I'm Cincinnati fans, I am, and maybe it's the Tennessee fan in me, where just at any sign of danger, I'm like that gif from The Simpsons of like Chuckles, I'm in danger. Like that at any given moment, you just feel like you can get a gut punch. I feel like that's how I'm feeling right now if I'm a Cincinnati fan.
Yeah, hold on to your butts. I mean, you just got to hope Notre Dame hires from within. I did see the odds favorite is their defensive coordinator.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and right behind him is Fickell. So that makes a lot of sense if you're Notre Dame to go get Luke Fickell from Cincinnati because he's hung on at Cincy for a while now, and it's tough though because I'm sure he wants to see this through because right now they are the number 4 team. They have a chance to make the playoff, and I don't expect us to hear anything about the Notre Dame job until after this upcoming weekend.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Because of that timeline.
I agree.
Now, that's nothing. I'm not like trying to break news or anything, but I'm just saying that makes sense to me that if it's silent from Notre Dame all week long, then maybe there is something that they're waiting for with Luke Fickell and to see how this weekend plays out. Because, I mean, I think if you look at Lincoln Riley, if Oklahoma beats OK State, how does that change the USC job? It doesn't at all.
Sure.
I think it could because now Oklahoma is trying to get that college football playoff spot, not OK State.
Right.
And does Lincoln Riley leave while trying to get that last spot? Because I know he's been before, but you have a shot to win a national title if you're in the playoff. I think that might have delayed USC's announcement a little bit.
It's going to be interesting to watch, and I think that Cincinnati fans have every right to be kind of scared at the moment. If I'm a Notre Dame fan, though, Austin, after hearing from the College Football Playoff Committee yesterday, and from some of these conversations after they were ranked number 6 behind Oklahoma State, it's interesting to me. Is Notre Dame evaluated differently because they have an interim coach?
They should be.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely, because the head coach is very important. I mean, so it's like if you're missing one of your best players. Do you evaluate the Titans differently without Derrick Henry? Would you
Well,
evaluate?
yeah.
Would you? Yes, so absolutely they should. That's logic.
But does it change the resume of what they did over the course of this season?
Like that.
This is the fundamental question about the college football playoff.
Their resume has them in the conversation. Now, when you're splitting hairs between who gets the 4th spot, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, or Notre Dame, or whoever else, you're looking at who has the best chance to win the championship, who is the best team right now moving forward, not who has the best resume from September through Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And no Brian Kelly, no Notre Dame. It's a big deal.
I mean, it sucks for those players, though. I mean, not that college football is fair or has ever attempted to be fair, despite saying that everybody has an equal shot at the national championship and all these things that college football claims to be as a student athlete. But I think you kind of opened Pandora's box last year when you have Clemson losing to Notre Dame without Trevor Lawrence, and you have the COVID aspect of this, and you put in the protocol of the college football playoff where you say last season that each committee member will be allowed to determine if he or she believes that the absence of a coach, quote, likely will affect a team's performance moving forward. That's what the rules say. By the letter of the law, yes, Notre Dame.
So you don't think that should be the rule? I mean, because it makes complete sense.
I think if you're going to make that the rule, then why are we acting like any of these conference championship games mean anything? Why are we acting like the regular season means anything when it boils down to a committee deciding who am I picking to win a game between our 4th and 5th option? That's what this boils down to. I think that's the message that you are sending.
Well, and
that your resume doesn't mean as much as it's like Vegas saying if Oklahoma State played Cincinnati tomorrow, who wins? That's the way you're deciding these games. If Alabama played Cincinnati, who wins? Probably Alabama. Now, does that mean they deserve to be in? I don't think it does.
It depends on how they look in the SEC championship game.
Right. And that's what we don't know yet.
And how pedestrian they looked at Auburn.
But again, if you're talking about availability of coaches and availability of players, Jamison Williams not being available for that game, their running back, Brian Robinson not being available for that game makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And by the letter of the law,
I think you should take
you're judged differently on, hey, maybe that's probably a better win than you think at face value because Alabama's missing their running back and their top receiver.
But they went into 4 overtimes, and Auburn's not that good. Auburn's
really bad.
Auburn's also without its starting quarterback.
You're right.
And
I think
there's no excuse for Bama scoring 10 points in regulation and not getting the 7 until the very end. And if it was a bad game.
If Tank Bigsby just stays in bounds, then it doesn't even get to that point.
But yes, but you should be able to take everything in consideration when trying to figure out who deserves to be in the college football playoff.
It's interesting.
If there's no head coach there, then yeah, that's a big deal. If there's no starting quarterback, that's a big deal.
I think we could say this too.
Beyond head coach and starting quarterback, I think that's when you start to get in the gray area where it's not as meaningful. But those 2 spots, those 2 humans, yeah, they're pretty important.
Those 2 humans. No, I think it's a good point. 615-737-1045, our number. When we come back, we take a look at the Tennessee perspective on everything that has gone on in the past couple of weeks. Sounds like Josh Heupel is staying at Tennessee. But I think what we've learned over these past couple of weeks is that what head coaches say means absolutely nothing. So we'll get the Tennessee perspective from Grant Ramey, Go Vols 247 coming up. Big basketball game between the Vols and the Memphis Tigers coming up here in Nashville in a couple of weeks. A game I think Tennessee fans have started to turn their attention to. We'll get the early report on the hoops side of things as well. Grant Ramey, Go Vols 247 coming up next. It's the Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone. Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone. The only thing that's missing is Buck Reising. Along with Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports, I'm Will Boling. Brett Batchelor, our producer. Great to have you with us. Talking a little bit of college football playoff and the craziness that has gone on in the college football world over the past couple of days. And now we are pleased to be joined on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline by our good friend Grant Ramey of GoVols 247, talking Tennessee football, a little bit of Tennessee basketball as well. And Grant is also a suffering Braves fan with me today as we welcome Grant in. Grant, I feel like this is the first question every time I have you on, but today in particular, do we need to compare notes on who we are going to counseling to see if Freddie Freeman ends up becoming a Los Angeles Dodger today?
After the season they had and after the October they had and so many frustrating moments through the first, I don't know, until August, basically. Once they won the World Series, I was like, I'm not going to complain anymore. There's nothing they could do to make me angry. And then they're like, you know what? You want to bet? Let's stall on these Freddie Freeman rumors and let's just drag this out as long as possible. And let's let him be, whatever, talking to the Dodgers, talking to the A's, whoever, and just pay the dude. He's the face of your franchise. I don't know how it's gone on this long, and it's going to be even longer because they're going to have a lockout, right? So who knows what's going to happen. It
is frustrating, and it is horrifying to so many of us that live in this region that all of our teams tend to follow the same formula. And the second you feel safe, disaster strikes. And that is absolutely the case with our Atlanta Braves as we sit here, and I've turned tweet notifications on for like most national baseball writers trying to figure out if there's any kind of deal today. All right, so Grant, obviously a crazy week in college football, but we're talking to Austin about this at the beginning of the show. This feels like the kindest Tennessee has been in terms of never-ending news cycles that aren't just totally negative over the course of this year. You had a good, not great basketball team at the beginning of the year. You got Tennessee baseball filling summer content that typically becomes list season. You have a first-year head coach that makes people interested, and then you have a Tennessee football team that kind of exceeds expectations a little bit and surprises people, kind of now passing the baton to Kennedy Chandler and the fun that is Tennessee basketball. Can you remember a time, to quote The Office, where you've had so many days without nonsense for Tennessee? Because I can't think of one, and I've probably just jinxed it by saying it.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you guys trying to speak into existence?
It's been way too boring.
Yeah, are y'all trying to go back to some chaos? Because Tennessee athletics is... But, I mean, no, you're right. That's a really good point. Not really something I'd thought about in terms of combining the three sports. But, yeah, I mean, going from what basketball has been in the past, what baseball was able to do under Tony Vitello this year, what Josh Heupel was able to do with this Tennessee football team in year one. I mean, everybody seems like on social media and everything's talking about the chaos and insanity of college football for the last X number of hours with coaches leaving a major job for another major job. Buying all and however many players in the football, and it's just like that just seems kind of like the normal operating procedures for Tennessee athletics because we're so used to so much chaos and so much stuff going on. But it feels like Tennessee's sitting this one out, and I'm going to knock on every piece of wood in my home when I say that because Tennessee needs to be sitting these out for a while. They need some continuity. They need some of these positive, non-chaos days. You need to pile as many of those as you can together because that's what's going to get Tennessee football back on track. And it looks like, for the time being, that they've made a really good hire in that last cycle, and maybe they can continue down this road.
Yeah, that being said, Grant, when the Oklahoma job is all of a sudden open, what's the internal text thread like with you guys at GoVols 24/7 about, okay, you guys ready to, are we doing this again? Like, who's doing what? You're splitting up roles to figure out what might happen with Josh Heupel there.
Yeah, we discussed kind of in jest, like, what's the hot board going to be? What name are we going to be ready to go? What are we going to do? Seriously, it's really easy to connect, obviously, Josh Heupel and Oklahoma based on what he did as quarterback at Oklahoma and all that stuff. But also, at the same time, Josh did a great job at Tennessee in year one. But in January, there's a lot of people complaining about him getting hired at Tennessee, thinking he could have done better. Well, Tennessee obviously did a pretty good hire. Imagine in 10 months' time, he would be somebody that would climb to the top of the list when Oklahoma has an opening with a roster that's as good as Oklahoma has, pending, however many transfers happen in the loss of the recruiting class and all that stuff. So it always felt like Oklahoma was going to have to kind of get down the list and have to be turned down by some people before Josh Heupel was really a serious name that was really going to be legitimately buzz there, because he was there. He's been there in the past. He's coached there, obviously, and there's some weird fallout where he was fired or not retained, or I don't know what the label was technically there. So we joked about it, but yeah, it was only a joke, and we were kind of crossing our fingers and knocking, like I said, knocking on every piece of wood we could find.
Yeah, same, but also not bad for business if that does end up happening. Anyway, but Grant, how much do you think Josh Heupel's 7-5 on the field season has helped him in recruiting and also the transfer portal? Because that was obviously the biggest question that we had about him when he was hired, and still kind of is. But how do you think the on-field production has helped him in those areas?
It's huge. It's absolutely what he has to have more than anything, really, because when Heupel's hired, you don't think Josh Heupel, this guy's one of the most elite recruiters in the country. He's going to have the most elite recruiting results as soon as he walks in the door. What you know about Josh Heupel is this offense goes insanely fast. They put up insane numbers. If you're a quarterback, you're going to put up big numbers. If you're a receiver, you're going to have huge numbers. Running back, all these skill positions, whatever. So what he has to sell when he gets to Tennessee is that reputation. And basically, he's just trying to make you trust those numbers that he's produced in the past and what you've seen from him during his coaching career. Well, now at year one at Tennessee, he's gone from, a year ago, all these Tennessee players leaving the portal, the best names on this roster are gone. Tennessee, it looks like Tennessee's not going to be back in a bowl game for however many years because of everything that went wrong in 2020. And fast forward, and here's this offense producing on the field. They're putting up huge numbers. They have huge receiving numbers. They have Hendon Hooker putting up huge numbers at quarterback. They go really fast. They're really exciting, and they've shown up. And he has a roster full of players that they spent a season worth looking like they love playing for this guy, and they trust in him. They trust in his staff. And now he has that to sell. He has that, concrete evidence that his system is in year one with probably the thinnest roster he'll ever have, putting up those kind of numbers. That's exactly what he has to have.
Grant Ramey of GoVols 247 with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Grant, do you get the sense that Josh Heupel's plan is more slanted towards the transfer portal? I know he obviously hits on a guy like Javonte Payton, a guy in Caleb Tremblay, who really contributed a lot for this team in year one, but that seems like kind of a dangerous way to live, and having to rely year in and year out on guys to come in out of the portal and contribute right away. Do you feel like that's his plan, or is that kind of basically just the necessity of we've got to build something and provide a proof of concept before we can recruit these high school kids that are so good in the state of Tennessee?
It's probably not 100% his plan year over year over year, but in year one, with the talent that they need to add to this roster, with what they inherited, with everything going forward, which they're trying to reset, be a huge part of the plan. And I think it's going to become more and more of a balance because the transfer portal is going to get busier and busier. I mean,
I think we may have lost Grant. Yeah. Well, it's, Grant, we lost you here for a second. I think we've got a little bit of a shaky connection, so our producer Brett's going to call you back here, see if we can get you back on. But I think, Austin, it's an interesting conversation because I wonder how much is Josh Heupel saying, I'm going to go transfer portal because this is a really good class in state, and we're not at the point where we can get a Ty Simpson or a Walter Nolan to commit. So is this out of necessity, or is this just the way Josh Heupel wants to build his program?
Well, I think it can be out of necessity, but there's also opportunity because you have a lot of coaching movements. And so with coaching movement, there's going to be player movement. And if the transfer portal has some pretty legit dudes that are coming out of these Power 5 schools because coaching firings and hirings have happened, then there's opportunity for Heupel to go get somebody who's proven somewhere else.
Let's go back to the phone, see if we can get Grant back on here. Sorry about that, Grant. Talking about just the transfer portal and the way Heupel is trying to kind of divvy up those recruiting responsibilities. It seems like there's got to be a balance between the two.
Yeah, I think my phone went into the portal for a minute. It was kind of busy. I mean, I think it has to kind of be a little bit of a way of life moving forward for these coaches because there's so much talent that goes into the portal, and it's so much easier to transfer now than it has ever been before. I mean, if you miss out on a guy on the recruiting trail, you can wait a year, and see if it doesn't work out at the school he picked. And if he does go into the portal, then you go right back at him, and it's like recruiting 2.0. So you have to evaluate there. You have to evaluate all this off the field stuff, what the talent the kid brings to your roster. If you can make a life in the portal a little bit, it can go a long way. I think you can see some other programs in the country that have rebuilt a little bit quicker because of how easy it is to add talent out of the portal these days.
So when you look at the 247 Sports rankings, you see a lot of these really good players in the state of Tennessee obviously going elsewhere. You've got Ty Simpson going to Alabama out of Westview. You've got Walter Nolan, well documented his pledge to Texas A&M out of Powell High School there in Knoxville. You got the Wade twins at Kentucky. Barryon Brown, a guy who's run a 10-3 100-meter dash, 4-star here in Nashville going to Kentucky. Do you feel like, Grant, that Tennessee wants to stay in state for their bowl game? Do you feel like they are trying to be in Nashville for the Music City Bowl or maybe in Memphis for the Liberty Bowl? I remember this kind of being a point of conversation for Philip Fulmer and Jeremy Pruitt over the past couple of years, because you look at this as possibly a free recruiting weekend in Nissan Stadium where you might have the orange and white game too next year. I feel like it makes a lot of sense for Tennessee to try to be here in Nashville, right?
It does. I mean, I think there's always traditionally some sense of you want to be in Florida for a bowl game on January 1 or as close to New Year's Day as you can get. And for Tennessee, obviously right now in that cycle, that would maybe be a Gator Bowl or maybe as much as an Outback Bowl. But I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Music City Bowl, and there's absolutely you cannot recruit the city of Nashville enough. You can't try to recruit with the in-state talent that's here. You got to keep as much of it as you can home. So there's always that push for Florida, and you want to get to a Gator Bowl or Outback Bowl or whatever, and you want to play as close to New Year's Day as you can, but there would be absolutely nothing wrong with as much advertisement as everything that would come with a weekend in Nashville for a game and what you could do in terms of selling tickets to that game and in just terms of presence in the city of Nashville, the mid-state. You definitely can't deny how big that would be.
Immediately once the season ends, the regular season, you look towards that 2022 schedule, and you're like, there's some wins on this thing for Josh Heupel. But if Hendon Hooker is around, is there any idea on a timeline for Hendon Hooker and maybe even a Cedric Tillman on when some of these guys might be making some decisions to come back or not?
No, I mean, I think the conversations start a little bit during the bye week a few weeks ago for Tennessee and these coaches, and I don't think they're really going to pressure and put a timeline on it or try to put a deadline on it, I guess. They just want these guys to kind of make the right decision. I think Heupel said after the game Saturday, the NFL is not a developmental league. You need to make that jump when you're ready to make that jump. I think they're going to give those guys the feedback. With Cedric Tillman, it's hard to imagine his stock would be any higher. I mean, he could come back, but the numbers he put up this season, as dominant as he was pretty consistently throughout the year for Tennessee, I think you would have to worry about him a lot more than Hendon Hooker. That's just kind of my own speculation in terms of kind of looking at what might be ahead for those two guys. I don't think they're going to pressure them. I think they're going to present the information, the facts, tell them what they're hearing about their NFL stock moving forward, and kind of you're trying to best time this jump to where you can monetize yourself as much as possible to make the best career as you can at the next level. So I don't think really you're trying to rush it. You're just trying to make the right decision.
Is there any thought about how NIL could affect a guy making the leap or not making the leap? Because it's the first time we've really had a chance to see what NIL can do here.
I think it certainly could affect a guy that, maybe you're down the list on the whatever position you play. You're down the list on that group in terms of when you're going to hear your name called in the NFL draft. If you're a late round guy, if you're that 5th through the 7th round, or maybe even the 3rd through the 7th round, whatever. Depending on the deals that you could get done in school, maybe it does make sense it takes away, I guess, a little bit of that gamble coming back to school. You're not playing for free. You're going to be able to make some money off your name. And if you can find the right deals, then I think that would give you a little bit of hesitation if you're on that fringe where you might hear your name called in the drafts, how much money you could make just staying on campus.
Grant Ramey, Go Vols 247 with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Grant, this seems to be the time of year where lots of Tennessee fans remember that, oh, hey, we got a basketball team, a pretty good one as well, and a team that has looked a little bit different this year, 86-44 over the prestigious Presbyterian program yesterday. But how unique is this team? I mean, they're 14-27 from three yesterday. It's almost like Rick Barnes has evolved in front of our very eyes on kind of getting rid of the mid-range and going to more three-point shots and maybe imitating teams like Auburn that have knocked them out in previous stops in the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament. How different of a formula will fans see as they reacquaint themselves to this basketball team this year?
Very, very, very different. You're not going to recognize the product on the floor. Basically, I mean, it feels like Rick Barnes read my Twitter mentions for the last, 12 months or whatever, when they were so frustrated by the amount of mid-range jumpers that they shot last year and they've shot throughout the Rick Barnes era. And we asked them about it a ton last year. Like, why is this offense? What's not going right here? And they kept saying they believe in the mid-range game and all that stuff. But here they are. A year later with a remade roster. He brought in 7 freshmen. They had, I think, 4 guys transfer, 3 guys go to the NBA last year. So it's a brand new, new look roster. It's a mix of old guys and a lot of young guys, and they're trying to score at the rim or they're trying to score at the 3-point line. They're going to shoot it a ton from the 3-point line. As you saw against Presbyterian last night, you got guys like Justin Powell that can go 5 for 5. You got guys like Victor Bailey. I think he was 3 for 17 before last night from the 3-point line, and he goes 4 for 8. So they got a lot of guys that can shoot it. And apparently they're going to kind of live. They're not going to live and die by the 3, but they're either going to try to score at the rim. They're going to try to score at the 3-point line, and it looks like a much more modernized offense for Rick Barnes.
Grant Ramey, GoVols247, has been our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. You can find him on Twitter at Grant Ramey. Appreciate the time, as always, Grant, and I will, along with you, be furiously refreshing my Twitter feed, waiting for the latest on Freddie Freeman the rest of the day.
It's fake. It's fake Twitter account season, so beware. Ken Rosenthal with 2 N's and 3 A's and 3 H's and all that.
I trust Ken Rosenthal, do not trust Ren Kozenthal. That is for sure. Thank you for the time, Grant.
See ya.
Thanks.
All right, Grant Ramey with us on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline. I kind of asked that question about basketball because I think that Tennessee fans endeared themselves so much to the way Bruce Pearl won. Not just the amount that he won, but like how he did it. Mm-hmm. And this is as close as Tennessee has ever been to that kind of basketball.
Yeah, fast, run, shoot, go.
Yes.
Right? And aggressive defensively.
Yes.
And turning a lot of the turnovers into transition, easy points, for sure. And I think Santiago Vescovi, or however we're going to pronounce his name this year, I think the biggest thing for me in watching this team this year so far and comparing it to last year is that him being off the ball makes all the difference. Not having to be the main ball handler. And now you've got really 3 guys who can be the primary ball handler. And I think that opens things up for him to do what he does best, which is not be that main ball handler. So I'm curious to see how the team continues to develop. Some of these young guys are going to just keep getting better. And you're not really going to take much from a 42-point win over Presbyterian, but it was still fun to watch.
Coming up next, we continue our college football discussion. We'll get to Ken in Tullahoma coming up after the break. You can join us as well. Give your thoughts on the chaos going on in college football at 615-737-1045. It's the Buck Reising Show without Buck Reising here on 104.5 The Zone. I'm not going to say how old I was when this song came out, but I vividly remember how old I was when this song came out.
I can't say the same thing. I don't. Yeah.
Buck Reising Show, 104.5 The Zone. I was in elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Doing Crank That Soldier Boy. Yeah. Alongside Austin Stanley, Brett Batchelor, our producer, Will Boling with you. Yeah, it's one of my favorite activities in this building, being at the age difference that I am to some of these people. And they will just like say things like, oh, that was fun in college when like X or Y song came out. I was like, yeah, I was 6.
I'm only 31, but you make me sound
No, I'm not even talking about you either here.
Yeah, no, I get
like
it.
it's like me, Buck, and Lucas are like secluded. Sometimes I'll just walk in the studio and be like, there are things going on in like pop culture, which I don't really know anything about pop culture, but still like me with my zero knowledge of pop culture, I have to like walk in here at some points and just have other people that understand the language that I'm speaking. Because I do feel like it's a foreign language sometimes.
Yeah, and I know none of it. Yeah,
I don't either.
I speak.
I'm 24 going on 74, but still.
Yeah, I don't have time. I just don't have time to like
That's
know
true.
like what we were just talking about video games. I haven't
Right.
played a video game in like 8 years.
It's the only thing I still do for myself that I still did in like high school, which wasn't that long ago, but still.
Yeah.
615-737-1045, our number. We go back to the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline where Ken has been waiting patiently in Tullahoma to talk college football. What's going on, Ken?
Hey, guys. Y'all are doing a super job making Buck Reising proud, man. Y'all doing great.
Thank you,
Listening
sir.
to you from Tullahoma. I've got the ultimate Saturday planned out. Our Tullahoma Wildcats, shout out to John Olive and our Tullahoma Wildcats, going to play for the first state championship 4A versus Elizabethton ever
right.
at 11 o'clock Eastern down at Finley Stadium in Chattanooga, and then headed up to the SEC championship
Ooh.
game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, guys. So I'm going to put my crimson tinted glasses on. I heard you guys speaking earlier about this SEC championship, and I got a couple points to make. The first one, I believe Jamison Williams' targeting was in the first half, so I think he's going to be available from the start of this game because he just had to sit out the second half against the Auburn game in the Iron Bowl. So that's one good thing because Nick Saban and Bryce Young need their soldier boy out there at wide receiver to beat the Georgia Bulldogs. Secondly, this college football playoff, one of the criteria, that they're supposed to a metric they're supposed to measure is factor in injuries. Alabama has their top 3 tailbacks out of this game. Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams, ACL injuries. Ryan Robinson pulled a hamstring in this game. So that's going to leave it to Trey Sanders. If Alabama loses a close game, then, Posse is saying Alabama's out automatically if they lose. I don't buy that, guys. And the reason I'm saying this is if you put the Cincinnati Bearcats and even the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC West, neither one of those teams are undefeated this year. And, yes, that includes the Georgia Bulldogs. The West is a lot stronger than the East. Alabama's got a great shot to win this game. I know they're 7-point underdogs. But, look, Kirby is 0-3 against Saban, and Alabama's won 6 straight against Georgia, and Alabama is in a must-win situation. Guys, I think they can get it done. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Thank you for the call, Ken.
I think if Bama could, the spread I'm looking right now, it was 6.5 last I looked at it yesterday. Still 6.5. Georgia minus 6.5. If Bama keeps it and can cover, I think that's where they have an argument. But it also depends on what Cincinnati does with Houston. If Cincinnati blows out Houston, who's also a pretty good program, then it's tough. But like he just mentioned, Georgia wouldn't be undefeated if they played the SEC West. Well, they dominated Arkansas. They made Arkansas look like children.
Yeah.
37-0. And then they blew out Auburn too. And so I know both those teams gave Alabama a really good game that Alabama probably didn't feel comfortable in.
Right.
So, Georgia's just on a different planet this year. And so I do think Georgia would be undefeated if they played in the SEC West.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think the things we typically say about Alabama, we can say about Georgia this year, and they are equally true.
Yes.
No doubt about it. 615-737-1045, our number. To me, Austin, it's kind of like seeing a Tennessee team go to the swamp. I'm not going to pick it to happen until I see it happen. It's kind of how I feel about a group of 5 team making the playoff. Like, logically, this obviously is the best chance anyone's ever had.
Right.
We can agree on that. We can agree that Cincinnati should feel as good at this point as any G5 team has ever felt going into this situation. But until I see the committee actually give them a shot, I'm going to be more skeptical probably than I should be.
I think it helps that Cincinnati has to, one, they beat Notre Dame, and that win continued to age well as they are 6th in the country. And then Houston is a formidable foe, right? Like, they're not just going to have some random team that they're going to play in the conference championship and beat them by 40.
Right.
That Houston has been a legit program and was also, kind of in the conversation of the highest ranked group of 5 team a few years ago too. So, and Cincinnati's been here a couple times. Like, it hasn't been to this level, but Cincinnati's not just a flash of the pan school that's having a great year like Coastal Carolina was last year.
Right. 615-737-1045, our number. Let's get to RJ in Phoenix before we get a break. What's going on, RJ?
What's going on, gentlemen? How y'all doing, man?
We're good.
Y'all doing a great job. I wanted to get back to something y'all was talking about with Grant as far as the NIL.
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with the rules and the oversight, but I'm just trying to figure out what's to stop Mr. or Mrs. Kroger up there in Kentucky from, telling Hendon Hooker, we give you a couple stores, give your mama a job in the house. You come play for us your last year. Like, what is in the rules to stop NIL basically from looking like free agency? Because if a kid can just leave a school and go play for another school next year and they can get paid, boosters, sign an autograph, commercials, whatever, isn't this free agency now? Or do I not have enough information about what's going on? And I'm listening on the app, so if y'all can just put me on hold so I can listen.
Thanks, RJ.
So it has to be approved by the university. It can't just be, Mr. and Mrs. Kroger, like he's saying. It can't just be me or you. Like, it can't be a booster saying, I own this company. I'm going to, give you your mom or dad a job, and then also allow you to pump me out on your Instagram for X amount of dollars. It has to be approved by the university. And I think, and for Tennessee's sake, I think they're doing this great because Grant Firking owns a business in Knoxville. He's a walk-on player, and he actually created a second business as a walk-on player that helps his teammates and other athletes around the country do it the right way, because it can easily be done the wrong way. But, it's got to be approved by the university, so it can't just be that wild, wild west. But it's not far from free agency, so he's got a kind of point there.
615-737-1045. Thank you for the call, RJ. It does feel like kind of the first full offseason where we've had the chance to see NIL in full effect.
Yes, because it started, July 1st?
Mm-hmm. I don't know how many things were probably agreed upon before ink was put to paper.
A lot of them were, because July 1st, you saw a bunch of Instagram posts.
Bo Nix is holding Milo's sweet tea.
Yeah.
Within like 2 minutes. That was at like midnight.
Yeah. Oh, it started immediately.
One of my buddies, fellow Brentwood High grad, actually, of yours, works for Front Office Sports, helps run their social media.
Yeah.
And that day, I think, was the busiest day I've ever seen anyone work of any of my friends.
I'm sure.
Of just like posting that it's the business of sports and that's what they do. And that was like the mecca.
I'm sure whoever runs the 24/7 sports transfer portal Twitter account's doing the same thing.
God help them.
Yeah.
And we come back, Austin, we shift gears, talking still college football, but a conversation about Brian Kelly that you had this morning.
Yeah, I think him going to LSU sends a message about a massive flaw in college football.
All right. Do that when we come back. Final hour of the show. It is the Buck Reising Show without Buck Reising right here on 104.5 The Zone. Final hour of the show on a coaching carousel that continues to be a dumpster fire as Brian Kelly approaches the podium to meet with the LSU media for the first time here in a couple of moments. College football playoff rankings are out. Talking a little bit of Vols, a little bit of Titans throughout the show today. Been a fun show with you and appreciate you hanging out here on the Buck Reising Show. Brett Batchelor, our producer, Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports with me, Will Boling. 2 hours down. This is double of what you usually do on mornings.
Yes.
Give me a progress report on our checkpoint.
I'm good. I had half of my lunch that I brought in because I normally eat lunch at 11:30. So I'm in good shape.
I say this jokingly too because you have prepared for this better than me. That's the thing you don't think about when you do this time slot is that you're right between like breakfast and lunch.
Yeah. And
so you have to take care of one of those meals. And I work out every Wednesday morning, and I skipped breakfast this morning, and I'm in like a stratosphere of only having black coffee today at this point.
See, I'm very fragile. If I don't stick to my routine, I'm worthless. And so I knew that I brought in my Greek yogurt parfait that's half of my lunch every day, and I knew that if I had it with me, I'd be good.
Maybe that's why I'm worthless most days. Some might say every day.
There you go.
615-737-1045. Routine and I do not get along. So as Brian Kelly starts to meet the media at LSU, something I'm sure Notre Dame fans will handle very well, and the first time they've seen a coach leave their program since 1917, and the last time they did, it was a coach going to take care of his ranch back in the day, which is that's something I think I'm going to mention on the show every day because I love old stories in college football about things like that. It's so funny to me. But you had a conversation to have about what Brian Kelly has kind of exposed in college football at this point of the coaching carousel.
Yeah, and it's a problem that's been going on for a long time, but I think what Brian Kelly just did it shows us how significant it is. So Charlie Burris and I, who does our Vols podcast once a week, and he does our game day reaction shows with Jonathan Crompton, we were doing the A to Z morning show today, and he brought it up really eloquently. It's that Brian Kelly knows he cannot win a national championship at Notre Dame. He can't do it. And if you can't do it at Notre Dame, how many programs can? Not many. Not many. So college football's flaw is that only maybe 5 or 6 can actually win the national championship with how it's set up right now. Not make the playoff, but just actually win the national title. And Notre Dame is not one of them. One of the most prestigious programs in the history of the sport is not able to get to that point. And Brian Kelly knew it. He tried. He gave it 10 years or so, and he had to go where he can because the last 3 coaches who have been at LSU all at least have won.
I think Notre Dame is an outlier in the rest of the conversation about this because Notre Dame's best chance was last year when they were tied to a conference, when they had the ACC. And I feel like Notre Dame on its own doesn't fit into the current landscape of college football the way that it used to. I mean, Brian Kelly, the academic aspect of getting into Notre Dame and the standards that they have continued to uphold there, this looks like a guy in Brian Kelly who says, I want to show what I can actually do without Notre Dame holding me back. And I think you're exactly right, that it's a guy who never had a recruiting class higher than 9th at Notre Dame.
Because who are you recruiting? What area of the country are you recruiting? Now, it feels very strange to like pluck Brian Kelly out of South Bend, Indiana,
right,
and then drop him in the bayou.
No doubt.
How's this going to go?
I can't imagine a bigger shift in the type of kids that you're recruiting going from the Midwest to the bayou.
Yeah, and the culture, they just fired the guy who was the perfect culture fit for LSU. So it just because you fit the culture and what it's like in that area, Derek Dooley was a good culture fit for Tennessee, but he was a bad head coach and in way over his head.
Yeah.
And so with Brian Kelly, it's the college football playoff have made the elites more elite because, and we talked about this morning too, the NFL gives everybody hope.
Yeah.
And there's 2 ways you can have hope.
Right.
You're either a good team and you're building towards that playoff berth because once you get there, you have a chance.
Right.
Because anything can happen in the playoffs. Or you're a bad team and you get higher draft picks. But in college football, you're a good team. You get the best players and you continue to separate yourself. And so That's why you're seeing the elite of the elites of Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma,
right,
that have separated themselves from the pack. Now, this year's been a little different.
It definitely
and I'm curious of why. Is it because of the transfer rule? Is it just because it was a natural down year for a couple of these programs of losing a quarterback or two? But, unless you're going to have to expand the playoff if you want to fix the overall problem in college football. It's just by expanding it, you're going to have to fight through a few years of a bloodbath of, team 8 facing off team number 1.
Right.
And what that's going to look like on the field.
I think the way Cincinnati has kind of changed the script, Austin, is the fact that when you have a starting quarterback in Desmond Ridder who could walk onto the campuses of most of the other top 10 teams and still start, that's when you allow yourself to sit at the big boy table.
Definitely.
That's when you give yourself that chance. Right. And I think that this is a larger discussion as well about how teams like Ohio State and Clemson have imitated what has happened in the SEC. I think the skill gap between the SEC and everybody else has never been wider in one area and has never been narrower in another. The skill position guys, Ohio State, Clemson, even throw Oregon in there, same type of quality. What they call Earth, Wind, and Fire, the trio of wide receivers that Ohio State has.
Yeah.
Up front, the offensive line and the defensive line, that's where the SEC continues to, I think, widen the gap on everybody else in the way that they recruit big guys. And I've seen this conversation over the course of the offseason. Stephen Godfrey, a great college football voice. I've seen him chat about this on Twitter at times as well, and kind of got me thinking, I want to look for this over the course of this season. Those trio of wide receivers that Ohio State has, led by Chris Olave, who's going to get paid a lot of money next year, is as good as any wide receiver core that Clemson, that Alabama, that, maybe Alabama might be the outlier in this circumstance. But I feel like these programs are changing the formula by getting skill position guys that could start for SEC programs and good SEC programs right now.
Yeah, and the difference of why Ohio State's not in the conversation this year is because their quarterback from Southern California couldn't throw in the snow.
Right. I mean, it is that fine of margins now. And it's so interesting the way, the Harbaugh era goes at Michigan, and now all these people want to say the Harbaugh era has officially started at Michigan today. Okay, well, it hasn't, first of all. But him putting signs around the facility of what are you doing to beat Ohio State today? He almost leaned into the fact that Michigan has been the little brother over the past 10 years, and it worked.
You have to. That's the only way you can get the emotion out of people, right?
It's really interesting.
Yeah. It's
a case study in knowing you're the little brother and kind of embracing it. And Oklahoma State did the same thing to Oklahoma on the same day. Like, Saturday was as weird of a rivalry weekend as we have seen in quite some time because of teams that are perennially not beating the powers that be finally won. And Auburn almost made it a perfect sweep.
Oh, yeah.
Auburn has been one of the most fascinating and I think one of the most under-discussed teams in college football this year. Because I think people, when they go to Penn State earlier this year and they looked really good in a really incredible atmosphere against a Penn State team that everybody thought at the time was really good, people just kind of assumed that, oh, yeah, Auburn's good. Like, Auburn, this is kind of what they do, right? They've got a good quarterback. Bo Nix is great. And then you look at the fact that the Auburn offensive coordinator position has basically been defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts. It's the 5th straight year where they will have a new offensive coordinator next year.
Jeez. With
Mike Bobo officially fired. It's almost like that is correlated to how Bo Nix has played. It's a fascinating team. They go. I was going to ask this question on Twitter if they ended up beating Alabama over the weekend. Has any team gotten to 7 wins by beating Alabama? Like, has any 7-win team?
Not this century.
They would have been the worst team to beat Alabama since who?
UL Monroe.
I was going to say Louisiana Monroe's the first team you think of.
Gotta be.
I mean, 2018, Auburn has Chip Lindsey. 2019, Kenny Dillingham. 2020, Chad Morris. Ooh. 2021, Mike Bobo. 2022, someone else. The Mike Bobo hire to Auburn, absolutely the weirdest hire that was made by an SEC coach, I think, that last cycle this past offseason. It was so strange. Didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm looking back in 2007. Bama went 6-6, lost to Monroe. Also lost at Mississippi State that year and lost at Auburn again in 07. But Monroe has to be the worst.
Has to be.
Yeah, because 2008, guess what? Went to the SEC championship and lost to number 4 Florida. So,
and I was going to say too, the South Carolina team the Spurrier team that beat Alabama, that wasn't a bad team.
No, not at all.
That was what, Marshawn Lattimore? Not Marshawn Lattimore, Lord. Marcus Lattimore.
Yes. You almost got Kiffin's Vols.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that would have if that team had won, that would be the most recent bad team to beat Alabama.
Right.
615-737-1045, our number. In Austin, we give the number because when we come back, this is one of the segments of the Buck Reising Show that we continue with here today on the show. The dumbest thing in sports this week. You have a lot of different ways you can go with this. I have a new favorite Twitter account over the past couple days that posts the best posts of message boards across college football.
Nice.
It is an electric factory. I think I have 4 or 5 things I could read, but mine is not college football related. We come back. We take your calls on the dumbest thing in sports this week. We give you our takes as well for stupid things happening around the world of sports. You could take it to NFL. You could take it to college football. You could take it anywhere inside the world of sports. Load up the phone lines at 615-737-1045. It's the Buck Reising Show, and it's 1045 The Zone. Buck Reising Show on 104.5 The Zone as we get your dumbest things in sports this week. And you can join the show on the Mark Spain Real Estate Hotline at 615-737-1045. Lots to choose from in a crazy week around the world of football and beyond. Alongside Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports, I am Will Boling, Brett Batchelor, our producer. I've never had more options for a dumbest thing in sports this week than I think we do this week.
I could have up to 3.
Yeah.
Up to 3.
Yeah. Mine is not football related. We'll get to mine in a minute. But Austin, you lead us off.
Okay.
On your dumbest thing in sports this week.
So I go to Albert Breer's timeline, who does a great job of covering the NFL. But whenever you get people who cover one league and not other leagues cross over into leagues they don't cover, you typically get dumb things said. So this was Albert Breer who quote tweeted a tweet that said 5-star 2023 quarterback Malachi Nelson has decommitted from Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley has already called him on behalf of USC. So Albert Breer tweets, I can't remember a college football program ever getting absolutely nuked the way Oklahoma has over the last 12 hours or so. So much torn to the ground. Tennessee fans, you guys have done exactly what you're supposed to do. And this was on Monday, and Albert Breer was absolutely hammered for all of these things. Because obviously, this happened to Tennessee in this calendar year. When Jeremy Pruitt was fired for NCAA investigation, Oklahoma even raided Tennessee's roster, and Tennessee's entire roster was raided by programs across the country and absolutely nuked more than what Oklahoma is going through right now. Oklahoma just hasn't had this happen to them ever. And the same thing happened to Tennessee back a decade ago in January of 2010 when Lane Kiffin bolts to USC. Ed Orgeron is in a team meeting and rips his shirt off and tries to convince everybody to come to USC with him. Orgeron and everybody else jumps on the phone with the current committed guys saying, come to USC with us. So Albert Breer just doesn't pay attention to college football enough to know that when one coach leaves a school and goes to another one, this always happens. This is how it works. This is how it works in college football.
Gosh, I mean, this is one of those where Tennessee fans are like, yeah, we call this Tuesday.
Oh, and Albert Breer did respond and said, over the past couple of hours, I've learned how aggressive Tennessee football Twitter is. I'll stand down. You guys are right. Lane Kiffin leaving like he did in 2010 is in the conversation with this one.
Oklahoma fans have acted like a program that has not had a coach leave for another job since 1947 in college football. It's incredible that that's a thing. Maybe it's just the area of the country we grew up in. It's unbelievable. It's hard for me to fathom that is a real statistic that exists.
Well, if you think about it, if you were a Nashville person and you were born, late 80s into whenever, the early 90s, you had Jeff Fisher and Philip Fulmer there for a long time.
We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah, and so you never really know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but it's been a revolving door for both franchises ever since.
615-737-1045 if you want to jump in on your dumbest thing in sports this week. One of my favorite parts of every week is when Buck will put on his Twitter, what's the dumbest thing in sports this week? And Jonathan Schaefer with J. Martin Ramon finds a new way every week to say you are. It doesn't feel the same this week without it. My dumbest thing in sports this week, there are a few things for me in life that are constant. It's kind of a dark way to start this, but few things in life are constant. And Rob Manfred stealing the show of dumb things going on in sports and somehow being the dumbest and rising above or maybe falling below everyone else remains a constant in my life. This is a baseball this week, or a report from ESPN's Jesse Rogers, has a new proposal for MLB to expand playoffs. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. A 14-team playoff format. In this setup, 7 teams from each league would make the postseason. That's fine. Teams with the best record would get byes. That's fine. 2 other division winners and the top wildcard team host a 3-game series in the wildcard round. That's actually great. Here's where it gets bad. 2 other division winners get to pick their wildcard opponents from 3 other wildcard teams. Why in the world would you give teams an option to pick who they play in their first playoff game? Tell them who to play. Tell them when to be there. Tell them how many games the series is. Have a backbone and do your job. I don't get it.
I kind of like it.
Oh, come on. Dang it, Austin. I was afraid of this.
I kind of like it.
Dang it.
Because now it's basically putting a WWE spin on baseball, which, look, baseball needs more of that. I don't watch baseball. I watched the last game of the World Series from the 5th inning to the end.
Go Braves.
So I could watch the celebration of the Atlanta Braves. But I don't care about baseball. But this makes it interesting, Will. It does, because now
Not
you
happy.
get now you get
Not happy at all.
Fans do this. I don't know if the teams don't, but this would make the teams do this. Fans say, man, I really hope, this team beats this team because I think my team matches up better with team A rather than team B. So I hope team A wins. So now fans are doing this all over the place in every sport, in every level of sports. Now you get the team to actually get the pick. And then whenever you are picked to be the team and hand selected for a matchup, that just lights a fire. And I think it's very entertaining.
But knowing baseball, even if this was so, this is the thing. They're going to market this as a way to get people like you that don't like baseball to tune in and watch it. And you have a draft and, it's a good idea to unveil this. The way they would actually roll this out would be the most boring way possible. It would be like they would choose to do it like during a Monday Night Football game at like 7 o'clock on MLB Network, not even on cable that most people have.
At least baby steps, Will. I mean, come on.
I don't. But does it matter though? If no one, like if a tree falls in the forest, if the Yankees choose to play the Red Sox in the first round and no one sees it, did it really happen? Like
there would be talk about it. I think this is a good idea.
I don't know if there would be.
Well, but so that doesn't mean you just kill the idea because you don't think they'll execute it very
well.
No,
I mean that's just part of this argument to me. Like baseball is so good at being like the gif of, I think it's from 30 Rock, of like the 60-year-old guy walking into a high school conversation with a backwards hat and a skateboard saying, "How do you do, fellow kids?" That's baseball. Baseball, instead of trying to cater to people that probably aren't going to watch anyway, should honestly just play to their base. And this in no way helps your base.
But your base is going to die, like literally.
I don't
like,
see.
Literally,
see,
your
I don't
base
think,
is going to die. So you can't do that.
I don't think that it does.
Yeah, no, the base will die.
I think there are more people that the first base, second base going to die.
There are less people like you.
It's a really poor pun.
Yes, less people like you. And the base of baseball fans eventually will die off. Literally.
I think the stage of baseball players that you have right now in Ronald Acuna, Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis Jr., like the wave of young talent that they have, they don't know how to market those guys. Like they have a gold mine of guys that are 18 to 24 that are playing in their sport right now. They don't know how to market. I would rather them and instead of trying to make a 300 level change to their playoff system, market the guys that you have more effectively.
They better figure it out.
Yeah. And don't put your offseason of free agent signings in the middle of college football coaching carousel, the height of the NFL in week 12, week 13 right now, and don't have a work stoppage as well in the middle of it, where people like Allen Kirby, who always tells me at every remote, I haven't watched baseball since 94 because they lost my trust. They're never going to get it back.
There's a lot of people like that.
There are. God, it hurts
and
me
after
knowing
Barry Bonds, after everything. So you have more dumbest things in sports?
So it's that one. Look, the message board guy of a Oklahoma fan comparing Lincoln Riley to Satan. That was a good one. I gave those. I'm not going to give them again. The 5 bullet points of here's why Lincoln Riley is worse than Satan. One of them actually too was Satan wouldn't live in California. Some might say Satan is doing his best work in California. I don't know. Who's to say, really?
Right. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's up to you.
Who's to say? It's for you to decide. No, but there was that. And then the other one that I had, which was really funny, was the Oklahoma athletic director talking about Lincoln Riley leaving, saying, well, we would have liked more notice. Oh, Bob Boulsby and the Big 12 would have probably liked more notice when you, in the middle of SEC media days, decided you were going to go to the SEC. So
good point.
Now the shoe is on the other foot. What are we doing here?
Yeah, touche.
What else do you have?
The University of Kentucky
Oh, yes.
did the right thing.
How have we not talked about this yet?
By extending Mark Stoops. They should extend the contract of their football coach, Mark Stoops. But then to every time he has a 7-win season, add an extra year to that length of contract is dumb. It's just flat out embarrassing yourself. It's not holding yourself to a high enough standard. Because what is 7 wins in the SEC for Kentucky? It's really your 4 non-conference opponents.
Yep.
Because Louisville's not any good.
Right.
You're a better program than Louisville.
Right.
And then your 3 cupcakes that you always schedule in September. So there's 4. Now all you got to do is beat 3 of these 4 SEC teams. Vanderbilt, there's win number 5.
Yep.
And then either South Carolina, 2 of these 3, South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi State. On their schedule every year. So you're telling me Mark Stoops gets another year added to his contract by beating 3 cupcakes, Louisville, Vandy, South Carolina, and Missouri, and or Mississippi State? That's an extra year of contract. Hold yourself to a higher standard because Mark Stoops has done that for you.
Well, they beat UT Chattanooga 28-23 in non-conference. I mean, they're playing close non-conference games.
Yeah. But it's just really weak. It's like, why would you do that to yourself?
It's throwing away money for the sake of being able to sell to recruits in the state of Kentucky that our coach is locked up and, we're not going to let him leave.
But I also, if I was a recruit, which I was not, I look at that and be like, 7 wins, like that's it. That's like worth an extra year.
Yeah. You're right.
Make it 8 because make it at least 4-4 in the SEC.
Yeah.
Because 7 wins, 3-5 in the SEC. You have a losing record in the conference, and you're giving this guy an extension every time he has a 3-5 record, right?
So let's look at the non-conference opponents too, because you laid out the conference opponents well. Kentucky not exactly scheduling a murderer's row non-conference in football. This year it was Chattanooga, Louisiana Monroe, New Mexico State, and Louisville.
It's always Louisville at the end. So
always
you've
Louisville.
got those 3 cupcakes at the beginning.
2019, the last time there was non-conference football. Toledo, they beat them by 14. Not great. Eastern Michigan. After that, you wait a while, you get UT Martin, and then Louisville, and you beat Virginia Tech in the Belk Bowl, and you finish 8-5. 2018, this was the really good team. This was 10 wins, which would be like basically a lifetime contract for Mark Stoops at this point. They beat Central Michigan 35-20. They kill Murray State. After that, they get MTSU. They beat MTSU by 11, and then they beat Louisville 56-10 before.
It's the 3 easiest games you could possibly think of for your non-conference outside of Louisville.
I don't think we talk enough as sports media about how easy that program schedules. Like, it's really easy to claim historic success at a program when that success is losing to Tennessee every other year, because you can get them every now and then, but you're not going to ever win 2 in a row. You haven't since the 70s. And then you beat MAC opponents in Louisville.
Basically, yeah.
And it's the easiest ACC rivalry for any of these teams as well that have the ACC protected rival the last week of the season.
Well, Georgia Tech's pretty easy.
Georgia Tech has gotten pretty easy. That's true.
Yeah.
Before,
that's ugly.
I mean, Mark Richt, he would always lose like an unexpected game to Georgia Tech like every 2-3 years. Like Georgia Tech got Kirby, I think, his first year when they were 6-6. But in their current form without Paul Johnson, you're right.
Yeah.
615-737-1045 our number. I had that down to get into today. I'm glad you brought it up. Mark Stoops, to me, I'm not as high on Mark Stoops as many others are, because I think we just saw the SEC West version of Mark Stoops get fired at Florida for not being able to sustain his success. We literally just watched Dan Mullen, who had more success than Mark Stoops did at Mississippi State,
True.
be the guy that everyone always said, myself included, that was my pick for Tennessee in the Jeremy Pruitt coaching search, without question.
Same here.
All over Dan Mullen.
Yeah.
I
thought he made me cringe, but
absolutely.
I thought he would be a great coach at Tennessee, yeah.
Teams always go get the opposite of what they just had. So going from Butch Jones to Dan Mullen would have been a hard switch, hearing quotes like champions of life and things of that nature, just with a guy that's won. But still, I think Tennessee fans would have kind of cringed a little bit at that. But I was surprised to see Dan Mullen not succeed at Florida over a sustained amount of time. And if he can't, then why would Mark Stoops, with less success at Kentucky and worse recruiting at Kentucky, have any kind of success elsewhere?
And he's not the new age offense.
Not at all.
Either. So, no, I get it. And I don't disagree with you there. But what Mark Stoops has done at Kentucky is sustainable there. He's built it the right way. It's a solid foundation of your offense and defensive line are fourth-year juniors and fifth-year seniors. And you can win that way. At times, I just think don't give him another year of an extension if he wins 7 games. That's just weak.
I think we had this conversation yesterday too with me and Kayla Anderson, that people get into the trap of thinking that college football coaches always want the easy way out. Like the Lincoln Riley discussion has become like, oh, he's just avoiding the SEC, so he's going to the Pac-12. Like, I think the egos of college football coaches aren't that simple, where a guy like Lincoln Riley sees the legacy he could create at USC and says, yeah, I want that. I can create a bigger name for myself and a legacy for myself, and people remember who I was in college football at USC than I can here.
Well, and we just talked about Brian Kelly.
Right.
I mean, he left a job where he's got 10 wins every year.
Right.
And goes to LSU, who just fired a guy 2 years after a national title because he went 6-6.
I think Mark Stoops is the outlier of a guy that actually is comfortable knowing what his ceiling is and staying where he is. I think that is what people think that like most college football coaches are in this category. I think Mark Stoops actually might be in that category, because I don't think that guy is going to succeed going somewhere else outside of maybe just leaving the SEC.
Well, it'll take him a while. If he's not going to a program that's well established already, it'll take him a few years to get settled in, like it did with Kentucky. They weren't really good early on. He had to go recruit the big boys, and recruit Ohio, which he did a good job of.
Yeah.
And he built it there at Kentucky. So it's a long play for Mark Stoops, and right now it's all about immediate success and flash.
Right. William on YouTube says, worst recruiting in Kentucky's history, ? I don't think any of us said that. Said they're top 20 in the nation. Stoops is the 12th highest paid coach in the country. I never said it's the worst recruiting in Kentucky history, that's for sure.
Yeah, nobody said that. We're giving credit for, like, Mark Stoops deserves this contract extension.
Yeah, he does.
He just doesn't need to have another year after just winning 7 games. Make it 8, make it 9. Okay. Right. But 7? No, that's not good enough.
And
that's not good enough for what Mark Stoops has done for your program there, William.
And I just got the proof of concept in a guy that we expected to rise to the occasion in recruiting at a more fertile ground in Dan Mullen, going from 20s to 30s in recruiting classes in Starkville, thinking, oh, it's Florida, it's easier to recruit there. And he was consistently 9th to 15th in recruiting. So, honestly, you're kind of rolling the dice at this point when you hire one of these coaches that you just hope that they rise to the occasion and figure it out. And college football coaches are like the least adaptable people ever. It's what makes Nick Saban so different.
Yeah, there's a little psycho in them all. Now, I think we've triggered William because he says also Kentucky has one of the best football facilities in the nation due to Stoops. Y'all know nothing about Kentucky. Talk about something else.
The best football facilities in the nation? Isn't part of his deal with Kentucky was so that they build him a new facility where they don't have to share with the track team, because their current indoor football complex has a track around it. My team raced at that track when I was in high school. That was literally part of the release Kentucky put out, was that part of the deal was that he was going to get a dedicated football facility.
Again, Mark Stoops has done a good job. It's just 7 years or 7 wins makes no sense.
I don't think we can just assume he's going to do a good job if he got the Oklahoma job. That's the issue I have.
For sure.
615-737-1045. Goodness. Karen on Facebook says, you all are doing a great job covering for Buck. Can I get your autographs? We mix the bad with the good. As Buck would say, the praise is pouring in on 104.5 The Zone TV, where you can join us on YouTube, Facebook Live, Twitch, and Twitter Live as well. To all of our friends at 104.5 The Zone around the area, I want to remind you we are building a field of toys to benefit the Salvation Army's Forgotten Angels. Toy Field presented by T-Mobile is Tuesday, December the 7th, coming up very soon, just next week at Nissan Stadium. But you're picking out holiday shopping. Remember those in need this holiday season. Pick up a gift for a senior or a toy. And help us build a field of toys at Toy Field on December the 7th. That is Tuesday. And you can find more info about that at 1045thezone.com. Daniel on Twitter chiming in with us, Austin, saying a triggered Kentucky fan is the best Kentucky fan. I like that.
Cosign.
Pretty good. Coming up next, we wrap up the show, get you ready for the rest of your day. And a quote from the LSU press conference. Before Brian Kelly even got the chance to speak, we are already laughing about the quotes that are coming out of Brian Kelly's press conference. We'll do that next. Coming up, Buck Reising Show, 1045 The Zone. Fun show today on the Buck Reising Show, 104.5 The Zone. Great to have Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports with us. Brett Batchelor doing a great job filling in for Lucas Panzica. I'm Will Boling. Appreciate you hanging out, Austin. It's been fun.
Yeah, where's Lucas? I know Buck finally got to Egypt.
Yes.
It took him almost 2 full days to get there. It did. But he finally get there. I don't know where Lucas is.
Lucas, a well-deserved couple days off.
I got you.
He'll be back tomorrow. Lucas will be hosting with me tomorrow and Friday.
Nice.
Lucas and I on the call for the 2A state championship game on radio this weekend for the TSSAA championships. Westview and Hampton. Future Alabama quarterback for the moment, Ty Simpson.
For the moment.
You never know till the ink is dry.
Okay. Just, I don't know. You said you slipped that for the moment.
Oh, I know. No.
Is that you just holding out hope?
Maybe, I don't know. These things. I was reading earlier. I think I'm thinking about these VolQuest, these GoVols 247 articles of the last phase of the official visits and going into the December final official visits, and I don't know until a guy like Ty Simpson signs, and even if he does sign with Alabama, which it's looking like he will, the more you kind of read about these things, in-state guy like that, the way Tennessee just played, you never know.
Well, and like Grant said earlier, last hour, I guess, it's, if he doesn't get to play for a year or two, maybe he's back in the portal, and Tennessee needs a quarterback every year, basically. So
Tennessee fans had a lot of tweets to delete about Cade Mays from when he committed to Georgia.
That's why you don't tweet about recruits.
That's a great
most important
rule.
thing I've said this entire almost 3 hours.
Words to live by. Just don't do it.
Don't do it.
Just have Herm Edwards in the back of your head saying, just don't press send.
Please.
If it involves an 18-year-old that just started driving a couple years before. Ugh. Let's go to the phone lines real quick. Last call of the show here. Eli is in Murfreesboro. What's going on, Eli?
Yeah, hey, fellas, you got me?
Yeah, we got you.
I was wondering what your thoughts would be on Clark Lee and his Vanderbilt football team. I think the scores don't really show the heart they had this season, and I think they have a pretty high ceiling. I just wanted to get your thoughts on his potential. I'll hang up and listen.
Thanks, Eli. Look, moral victories are real. In year one, for a program that also has lost 21 games in a row now in the SEC, moral victories are real.
It's also real?
2-10.
Well, yeah, that's real too. But I was going to say covering spreads because
that's true.
Vandy covered the spread the last 4 SEC games, and 5 of the last 6. So look, they were getting better.
This is the problem with Vanderbilt's ceiling for me, Austin. I don't know what Vandy's good at. I really don't. That is, to me, one of the most important parts of a rebuild, and this was my goal for Tennessee coming into this season. Please tell me something that you are good at. I think we knew that it was going to be offense for Tennessee, and Tim Banks of the defense overachieves, and Josh Heupel says things going into Vandy saying we want to be the most aggressive team in all 3 phases, not just offense. I think that's a terrific quote from Josh Heupel, putting on record what his identity of not just one team, but an entire program wants to be. I don't know what Vanderbilt is building on other than Clark Lee being a cerebral, intelligent guy that speaks the language of the kind of kid Vanderbilt recruits and the rest of the SEC doesn't.
Every time I've heard somebody on a SEC network or national type level talk about Clark Lee, they always say, this guy has a plan for Vanderbilt. He's got a good plan. And then they usually say, believe me. He might have a good plan. I have no idea. And I don't know when we might start to see that plan take fruition.
Right.
But he's starting from such a bottomed out place. And will the administration actually allow him to execute whatever this plan is?
And I think part of it might be a PR conversation as much as it is an on-the-field product. Because Vanderbilt has marketed itself, let's just face it, a lot less than every other SEC team does athletically. They have Reddit college football tweeting for them, which is about it. So I think that's part of this conversation, that they're just marketed differently. But it seems like Clark Lee's mission is, let's tear down everything that these guys know about football and reset it. But what are you replacing it with? That's the quote we hear from Hoover And when we were in Hoover, it's, we're trying to really build down and get to the core of who these guys are and replacing things that they have been taught on and off the field. Okay, but then what's next? What are you replacing that with?
Right. Yeah, I just don't know where they go from here. I mean, they don't have a lot of guys, and I've seen a few transfer, like Cameron Johnson's leaving. I saw that. He hit the portal earlier.
Old teammate of mine.
Yeah, earlier this week. I just don't know what they have, and I don't know where they're going. It's not going to be pretty for a while. And I was openly a Will Healy guy for that job this time a year ago, and thought that Will Healy would have the public energy that it would take to get people to pay attention to Vanderbilt, because that's what he's done at Austin Peay. That's what he's done at Charlotte. That's what he could have done here. Clark Lee, maybe he's working behind the scenes before you can do that public, bring attention on yourself. But, you got to give him time. It was a bad situation. I thought they hung on to Derek Mason too long. I thought once Derek Mason could not get past 6-6 with Shermer and Ralph Webb and some of those other guys, I thought that was it, right? That's it. He had a good run at it, but he can't do it. And unfortunately, it lasted a little too long, and now Clark Lee has to pick it back up.
It is interesting to see where they go next. I was very much on Jeff Monken for Vanderbilt. In him, you have a very clear identity of running the flex bone, going and get the guy from Army who can build you a program that overshadows the deficiencies you have in your roster and the resources that you have. It's what you have to do at a service academy to win a lot of football games, which he has done at Army. And Will Healy, you could sell the energy. You could sell the fact that this guy has built something in the mid-state, albeit at a much smaller level, but is the high-energy young guy in college football. There is not one identifiable quality about Clark Lee that I can point to on the record publicly and say, that's what they build on. Maybe they have it behind closed doors.
Maybe, and we have no idea.
And that's what matters.
You can't take
ultimately.
anything from a 2-10 season that's necessarily positive.
Right. I don't want to make a discussion about Vandy that probably has a lot to do with PR and the way they market their team. That's not necessarily a Clark Lee problem, but I think it could become one if it doesn't change and if results don't change sooner rather than later.
Well, the 20-point loss to ETSU, game 1, didn't make things better.
No, it did not. On the way out, President William Tate, which I Googled this. His name is President William Tate IV for LSU. Sounds about right. As he introduces Brian Kelly, says, I told AD Scott Woodward the LSU Tigers need a claw. Character, leadership, academics, and winning. My God, they've hired Butch Jones, says Sean Sullivan on Twitter, a good friend of the show. Cringy. Brian Kelly has won a lot of places. You don't have to give a guy like that acronyms to sell him to your fans.
I also saw Billy Napier as a weird hashtag guy.
Is he really?
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. There was he would hashtag culture in that University
it had
of
like a
Louisiana.
2-3?
No, the culture, the U and the L were capitalized for University of Louisiana. And then he would hashtag journey. But the OUR in journey was capitalized.
That's a red flag.
Our journey.
It's a red flag.
No, don't do this. Nobody cares. These are bad. Stop. Please.
Awful. Been a fun show here on the Buck Reising Show. Back at it tomorrow. Lucas Panzica will be back in studio for the rest of the week with me. That is our time. Blaine and Mickey coming up next. They've got Mark Heim of AL.com, Jordan Dejani of CBS Sports. Appreciate Austin Stanley, A to Z Sports, hanging out with us today. Blaine and Mickey coming up next as we continue your Wednesday right here on 104.5 The Zone.